Did TNA stand for total non-stop absurdity, or am I wrong, dear viewer? One of the wackiest wrestling promotions ever, TNA's philosophy throughout its various incarnations seemed to be throw a load of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. The more outlandish, the better. That extended from storylines and characters to stipulation matches, of which TNA had many different types to draw from. A lot of those were often street fights or other somewhat ordinary gimmick bouts dressed up with a fancy name or a slight rule change, but others were completely off the wall and are actually in the conversation when it comes to craziest matches ever, either in concept, execution, or both. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and because 10 wasn't enough, these are the 35 craziest TNA match stipulations. Join us. Number 35, Raven's Clockwork Orange House of Fun match. One of the former ECW champion's signature matches sadly doesn't entail fighting a bunch of droogs on the mean streets of London, but it's a barrel of fun nonetheless. Clearly named by its creator, the Clockwork Orange House of Fun match was basically a hardcore match, only the bin lids, kendo sticks and steel chairs were attached to chains that were positioned above the top rope. Sometimes there would be a panel of steel fencing on one side of the ring too. Raven had several of these during his time in TNA against the likes of the Sandman, Sean Waltman, and, Trevor Murdoch? Sure, why not? A novel twist on an old favourite, Raven's version of the hardcore match was usually entertaining fare. Number 34, the axe handle on a pole match. Vince Russo was involved with TNA from the outset, even if all parties denied it initially, and so you can bet your swerves, bro, that there were plenty of pole matches on offer. One of the strangest was the axe handle on a pole bout between Curt Hennig and David Flair, because, you know, it was an axe handle. The match itself was a sorry state of affairs, as Hennig was well into the addiction that would shortly take his life, while David Flair was, well, he was David Flair, wasn't he? Hennig sent Chris Vaughn, a member of the Black Shirt security team, to retrieve the prize, I'm assuming because he himself couldn't be asked, and then used it on Rick's boy to win the match. The last bout of Mr. Perfect's career, this was a sad watch on a number of levels, and just a really weird thing to put on a pole. Number 33, the blindfold cage match. Nobody loved a cage match variation more than TNA. That will become abundantly clear during the course of this video. They loved cage matches so much that, starting in 2005, they ran the Lockdown pay-per-view, a show where every match took place inside a steel enclosure. It was overkill, no doubt, but some of the matches were bloody brilliant, it has to be said. Some, though, not so much, as it was clear that TNA creative geniuses were struggling for ways to make a cage match different. One of the worst offenders was the blindfold cage match, which first reared its ugly head as the final fall in the 2 out of 3 Falls Prince of Darkness bout between Bobby Roode and Dustin Rhodes. 2 years later, former America's Most Wanted partners James Storm and Chris Harris were booked in a blindfold 6 sides of steel match, which is silly enough anyway, but this was supposed to be an ultra-personal blood feud. And if they were bleeding, we couldn't see it because they had bags over their heads. Match was bollocks, naturally. Number 32, the committed match. You know, the legality of some wrestling match stipulations can be questionable at times. Women have been bartered, the custody of children have been put on the line, and so on. At Sacrifice 2014, TNA booked a match that also had iffy legal implications when Mr. Anderson met Sam Shaw in a committed match. Like an ambulance match, the goal was to beat up your opponent long enough to put them in the back of a van. Only this time, the van wouldn't drive you to a local medical facility, but the loony bin instead. Anderson won, and Psycho Shaw spent a few weeks within padded walls, as documented during subsequent episodes of Impact. Number 31, the Shop of Horrors match. One of TNA's many takes on the traditional street fight or hardcore match, the Shop of Horrors bout deserves mention because of how nutty it was. The bout took place between Abyss and Dustin Black Rain at Genesis 2007. It was no DQ, no countout, and could only end by pinfall or submission. And there were lots of weird weapons positioned around the ring, like an actual vice and a board covered in rat traps. It was was wild, it was unpredictable, and it was pretty flippin' bad. After the match, the monster took a key from Mr. Rain and unlocked a big shed on the stage, revealing a mystery man who immediately attacked him. We would later find out that that man was Relic. Hold on a second, Relic? Oh my god, that's Johnny Stamboli spelled backwards! Number 30, the Monsters Ball match. The Monsters Ball matches were typically well worth watching. On the surface, the stipulations weren't that weird. They were usually multi-man no disqualification bouts where the use of weapons was encouraged. What makes the Monsters Ball match so odd is that originally it was said that the competitors were locked in a room without light, food, or water for 24 hours beforehand. This was supposedly done to increase feelings of aggression. I mean, personally, I would just feel knackered. Imagine not having a cuppa or a packet of Wotsits for a whole day. They dropped this aspect in 2008, and it didn't make a jot of difference to anything. Number 29, the TNA Turkey Bowl. Speaking of turkeys, it's the TNA Turkey Bowl. A Thanksgiving tradition that's not gonna give Survivor Series any sleepless nights, the Turkey Bowl was a short tournament comprised of 4 matches. Although Impact have offered a non-tournament version more recently, it was the first 2 tournament years that were especially nuts, and that is what we will be focusing on here. There were 3 three-way qualifying bouts, each one featuring a member of the heavyweight, X, and tag team divisions. The winners would then meet in a 3-way final, where the winner of that match would win $25,000 dues, and the loser would have to put on a turkey suit. To be honest, considering the outfits of some TNA stars, I would call the turkey suit a huge improvement. Number 28, the Prison Yard match. 2 men enter San Quentin armed with shivs and only one leaves alive, is sadly not what TNA's Prison Yard match was. It was a sort of prison-themed match between Sting and Abyss, which started in a backstage area of Universal Studios and featured much wandering brawling. Sting was wearing an Abyss mask and did a crazy old man dive through a table, which was cool, before they made their way to the arena where there were a bunch of props and some set dressing to make it feel like a prison. Watching some of these TNA gimmick bouts feels like hard time, let me tell you. Anyway, as I say, there were props like a barbed wire board, naturally. I mean, I don't know what that has to do with prisons, but America is a scary place and it wouldn't exactly surprise me if that's what inmates had to sleep on. So, Sting won after he managed to get the monster into the solitary confinement shark cage. Number 27, the First Blood chair on a pole match. Bro, it's a gimmick on top of a gimmick, bro. The marks are gonna love it, bro. The objective here was to retrieve the chair from the pole and then use it to draw blood. The match was between 2 decent workers in Kid Cash and Abyss, so it was decent, with the former X Division champion getting the chair and the 2 proceeding to work the match around spots that utilized it. In the end, Cash won after Abyss missed a charge and collided with the steel. Oh, and this was also on the same show that featured a Blood of Gallows Retribution match between Raven and Vampiro, but, well, don't worry, we'll get there. Number 26, the 10,000 Thumbtacks match. Can you imagine stepping on a thumbtack? That would really hurt, wouldn't it? Definitely calls for a plaster. Now imagine 10,000 of the pointy bastards sticking into every limb of your body. That was the potential fate of Abyss, Raven, Relic, that's Johnny the Bull spelled backwards, and Black Rain at Turning Point 2007. Rain took a fall through a tack-covered table before Abyss slammed Relic onto a pile of them for the win. A couple of years later on Impact, Taylor Wilde beat Daphne in the first Knockouts 10,000 Tacks match, just 2 days after Daphne took a tack bump in a Monsters Ball match. Number 25, the LOCKBOX Challenge. Speaking of Daphne, a performer who truly never got the credit she truly deserved for all that she did, she was one of those involved in the LOCKBOX Challenge. The LOCKBOX Challenge was an 8-woman elimination tag match where the winners would get keys to mystery boxes that contained prizes. Daphne was joined by Velvet Sky, Madison Rayne, and Lacey Von Erich as they took on Tara, Angelina Love, ODB, and Hamada. So what did the winners get for their reward? Well, Tara got her, own tarantula. Okay then. Velvet Sky got a contract for a match of her choosing. Angelina Love got the Knockouts title. I mean, sure, why not? And poor Daphne got to strip naked. She didn't in the end, as she was attacked by Lacey, who happily took her kit off instead. A great day for feminism. Number 24, the Managerial Services 10 Minutes 2 Falls match. TNA TNA felt obliged to book their most exciting prospect, AJ Styles, against 124-year-old Larry Zbyszko in 2003. Despite being out-wrestled for the majority of their first meeting, the Phenomenal One came out of it as the victor. For the rematch, the living legend challenged Styles to beat him twice in 10 minutes, and if he did, Larry would become his manager. Lucky AJ, eh? Again, Styles was out-wrestled, but scored one fall. He couldn't get a second, however, which means he somehow lost despite winning? Zbyszko celebrated his triumph, but really it should have been AJ rejoicing at the fact that he didn't actually have to take on Larry as his manager, especially since he already had Mortimer Plumtree. You remember him, don't you? No? Good. Let's move on. Number 23, Ultimate X. One of TNA's better original creations, and a match that has an enduring legacy, the Ultimate X is still pretty damn ridiculous when you think about it. A showcase match for TNA's X Division competitors, the Ultimate X was first introduced in 2003, and though it took a little tweaking and practice to get it just right, it was a fresh and exciting concept right from the off. In it, the title or prize is suspended above the ring as it would be in a ladder match, but instead of climbing one of those, participants must shimmy across cables to retrieve it. Exciting, innovative, and inherently dangerous, the Ultimate X is a rare example of a wacky idea that shouldn't really work, but it does. Number 22, the Fans Revenge Lumberjack match. TNA fans hated Jeff Jarrett, the company's co-founder and perennial world champion in those early days. A darn good heel, Double J would habitually retain his title by the skin of his teeth, or more accurately with a balsa-wig guitar, and after so many years of the same shtick, loyal Impact Zone attendees got sick of it. So TNA threw them a bone in the main event of No Surrender 2006 with the Fans Revenge Lumberjack match. In it, fans would surround the ring for Jarrett's showdown with Samoa Joe, armed with leather straps that they could use on Jeff should he exit the ring. It was non-title, which sort of telegraphed the outcome, but Jarrett took a whipping from the fans as well as the Samoan submission machine prior to losing, for once. Number 21, Six Sides of Steel Arm Wrestling. As I mentioned earlier, TNA loved a cage match variation. Blindfold cage match, tables cage match, arm wrestling in a cage. Yes, arm wrestling in a cage. And not just any arm wrestling, but arm wrestling between Conan and Bullet Bob Armstrong. How exciting's that? Why this needed to be in a cage, or take place on pay-per-view, or even happen at all, does escape me. I mean, if they had to arm wrestle on top of the cage or something, maybe, but this was just absurd. They may as well have had a debate in a cage or a game of checkers in a cage. Number 20, Barbed Wire Massacre. Taking inspiration from FMW and DCW before them, TNA booked a no-roped barbed wire match in late 2005. Naturally, former FMW and ECW star and barbed wire match veteran Sabu was involved, taking on Abyss at the Turning Point pay-per-view. It was quite the spectacle, with both men suffering for their art, and this was the show's opener. The Monster was involved in another one a few years later, beating Judas Messias at Against All Odds 2008. The company staged one final barbed wire massacre, a tag affair between LAX and OVE and Sami Callihan in 2018. The company claimed the bout was too violent for TV and instead broadcast it on Twitch. They didn't get banned for that, but I did for being too sexy. Political correctness gone mad. Number 19, the Fish Market Street Fight. 2008's Destination X pay-per-view was top-loaded with gimmick matches as a Stand By Your Man strap match, Elevation X, and Fish Market Street Fight took place one after another. TNA was specialists in dressing up an ordinary street fight with a fancy new name, but the Fish Market Street Fight was an altogether different beast. In it, Team 3D battled with the madcap pairing of Curryman and Shark Boy. Did TNA ever give them a proper name? If not, may I suggest Hot Fins? The comedy kicked off with a pre-match weigh-in. Brother Ray and Devon had to come in at less than 275 pounds per the storyline, and it just got wackier from there. Much of the match revolved around the two teams smacking each other in the nads with frozen fish, and spots like Curryman reeling in Ray with a fishing rod. Ray also stopped to make out with a fish at one point, and I must tell you, I haven't felt the urge to kiss anything since. Number 18, the Leather and Lace match. A little earlier, we detailed the classic Knockouts LOCKBOX challenge that resulted in Velvet Sky getting a contract for a match of her choosing. She chose to face Knockouts champion and former tag partner Angelina Love in a leather and lace match. Non-title for some reason, the leather and lace match was supposed to be some sort of clothes ripping contest where they would have to wear leather and lace outfits, I guess. Anyway, Velvet reneged on that and made the match an I Quit match, during which Love was handcuffed and Velvet threatened to strip her anyway. The whole thing was odd and it ended in a no contest. Yes, the I Quit match ended in a no contest, bro. Number 17, the Sadistic Madness match. Not just any type of madness, folks, sadistic madness! What makes the madness so sadistic, you ask? Well, in this match, you needed to make your opponent bleed before pinning them. Trying to pin someone who isn't wearing a crimson mask? No dice, my friend. The Sadistic Madness match was an 8-man affair, with Perry Saturn, Sandman, Brian Lee and Slash beating the Harris Twins, Elix Skipper and Christopher Daniels in the main event of one of the very early TNA weekly pay-per-views. And you know what? Any match that involves multiple people bleeding for no reason and ends with a random one-off run-in from Viscera is a winner in my book. Number 16, the Ultimate Sin match. The feud between the New Church and the former ECW stars practically guaranteed bloodshed, and they duly did battle in a series of brutal gimmick matches. One of the most violent was the Ultimate Sin match, which was basically a hardcore match inside a ring that had its ropes wrapped in barbed wire. It wasn't as gory as the future barbed wire massacres, but the inclusion of other weapons, including a baseball bat suspended above the ring, made this just a little bit quirkier. The Extremists got the win thanks to an interfering Just Incredible, fresh from his WWE 90-day non-compete. Number 15, the last RITES match. A debacle so bad it had the Impact Zone passionately chanting, "Fire Russo!" The last RITES match between Sting and Abyss was another stipulation bout that was needlessly convoluted. It wasn't properly explained what it actually was beforehand, but it soon became clear that it was a death-themed casket match, only where the casket, the deathbed, was lowered from the ceiling, platform and all. There were what appeared to be styrofoam tombstones and 50-pence candlesticks in and around the ring as the two men did their best to brawl around the albatross that was situated in the center of the squared circle. Sting won and the monster had a nap while he slowly ascended above, but really Sting, Abyss, the fans, TNA and the world were losers for having to witness such tripe. Number 14, the electrified cage match. Forget blindfold matches and arm wrestling, how about an electrified cage match? Now we're talking. A cage match where the steel would be electrified. Sounds cool and dangerous and almost like nothing could possibly go wrong. Oh wait, no, it did all go wrong, didn't it? Forgot about that. The poor hapless fools implicated in this fiasco were Team 3D and LAX, who clashed over the tag team titles at Lockdown 2007. Now, TNA could have done something to show the supposed electrical charge, like having a small bit of pyro emanate from the cage, or have it rigged to vibrate on command. Instead, they flicked the lights on and off and played a totally unbelievable sound effect as the wrestlers tried their best to sell the devastating effects of nothing. Amazingly, this was the night that Brother Ray and Devon were booked to win their first NWA tag team titles. Say it with me, folks. Fire Russo! Number 13, Feast or Fired. More polls. So this time there's not one poll, but 4, with briefcases attached to each one. Inside each briefcase is a piece of paperwork. One is for a contract for a TNA title shot, one a contract for an X Division title shot, one a contract for a TNA tag title shot, and the last one with a pink slip. So 3 people walk away with future title shots while one wrestler walks away without a job. Why on earth would you sign up for this? Now, I know what you're thinking, this is wrestling. Of course they'll not really be fired, but on 3 occasions, the wrestlers who got the pink slip actually were let go, and in Chavo Guerrero's case, it was done without his prior knowledge or consent. See, now why didn't Vince just book a Feast or Fired match in Montreal? Problem solved. Number 12, Elevation X. How can we take the already risky Ultimate X match and make it even more dangerous? I know, instead of cables, why don't we just use taller platforms? And instead of grabbing a belt, why don't we make the finish a mandatory massive bump from them? That had to have been the thinking behind Elevation X, a match that only took place twice at Destination X 2007 and 8 and was won both times by, strangely enough, Rhino. In the first, the Man Beast beat AJ Styles, and in the second, he saw off James Storm. Scaffold matches are tricky as it is, as the performers spend a lot of their time in them hoping they don't, fall and break their necks or anything. But credit to those involved in these, because they did them about as well as could be expected. Still though, I'm glad there were only 2 of them. Number 11, the Rat on a Pole match. Listen, Russo, you can put whatever the hell you want on a pole. Pinata, bottle of Viagra, Judy Bagwell, but I draw the line at actual live rats. As part of the interminable saga of Black Rain, we were treated to him taking on Kaz in a match where his pet rat Misty was trapped in one of 4 boxes that were attached to poles. This was because Kaz kidnapped the rat, dyed it white, and renamed it Marlena. Bro, it's a reference, bro. The marks are gonna love it, bro. Sorry, I can't do the accent, but seriously, how did we get from 2 out of 3 falls and last man standing to rat on a pole? Number 10, the King of the Mountain match. The King of the Mountain match became an accepted staple in TNA and even had a title named after it, but that makes the rules no less, well, mental. Deciding that a standard multi-man ladder match was just too bloody boring, the TNA Brain Trust devised a match that was like a ladder match, only with a few twists. Instead of climbing a ladder to retrieve the belt, wrestlers would have to climb the ladder in order to suspend the belt above the ring, only to then, take it back down again once they'd won. Also, a wrestler can only become eligible to win if they score a pinfall or submission. A wrestler that suffers a pinfall or submission is then banished to a penalty box for 2 minutes, and there's no limit on how many wrestlers can get put in that box. The matches themselves are usually pretty exciting, to be fair, but the rules themselves are just so bonkers that it's hard to take it too seriously. Number 9, the Steel Asylum match. Oh great, another cage match. Haven't had enough of those yet, have we? In their bid to become the modern day version of Gladiators, hi Jet, TNA yet again took an ordinary concept and made it just that little bit more difficult. The Steel Asylum, originally known as the Terror Dome, was a multi-man X-Division bout inside a giant red cage. It was inspired by a similar match originated in Mexico's AAA promotion. Instead of climbing over the top of the cage though, the winner had to scale it and get through a small opening in what was basically a makeshift roof. Not only could you hardly see the action depending on how it was being filmed, but getting out of the thing was easier said than done, as Homicide found out as he struggled to escape it on the big live Monday, January 4th, 2010 episode of Impact, which went head-to-head with Raw. Number 8, the Black Tie Brawl and Chain match. TNA went all mid-south at Hard Justice 2008 with the Black Tie Brawl and Chain match. Jay Lethal and Sonjay Dutt were the 2 unfortunate saps who had to work with this stipulation, which was a chain match, meaning that they were chained together at the wrists, and also a tuxedo match, meaning that you could win by either stripping your opponent down to their boxers or by pinning them. Both performers were capable of having a grand match together in more favourable circumstances, but they were truly hindered here by the rules and the melodramatic romance storyline surrounding SoCal Val. A stupid match with a stupid name. The fans responded to this stupid letdown with the appropriate boring chants. Number 7, the Doomsday Chamber of Blood match. Oh, brilliant! Another cage match! Haven't had one of those for a good minute, have we? The Doomsday Chamber of Blood, which sounds suspiciously like a bad 80s horror film, was a variation of the aforementioned Sadistic Madness match, where a wrestler can only be pinned if he's bleeding. Only this time, it's in a barbed wire-topped steel cage. The first such match took place at Hard Justice 2007 and saw Abyss, Sting, and Test, for some reason, beat Christian, AJ Styles, and Tomko. The second saw Matt Morgan upend Abyss at Lockdown 2009. Both were fine. Number 6, the Dup Cup. Back to very early TNA now for the creation of a hardcore division called the DUP Cup. The DUPs were a group of hideously un-PC hillbillies, can I say that, who were involved in much stomach-churning toilet so-called humor. They were allowed to create their own thing after pestering poor Ricky Steamboat and came up with the DUP Cup, a hardcore style match that also used a point system. First to 10 points wins, folks. Here are the rules. Number 1, put your opponent through a table, 2.5 points. Put your opponent through a flaming table, 5 points. Number 2, put your opponent's head in the toilet, 2.5 points. Number 3, if there's poo in the toilet, 3.5 points. Number 4, if you goose a woman, 2.5 points. Number 5, if you goose a man, 3.5 points. Number 6, nail Jeremy Borash, 2.5 points. Number 7, nail Sarah the Ticket Lady, 2.5 points. Number 8, use a farm animal in any way during the match, 2.5 points. Number 9, spank your opponent's bare ass with horsey poo, 2.5 points. Number 10, if your opponent enjoyed being spanked, minus 2.5 points. Number 11, introduce your opponent to Jay, an inflatable doll, 2.5 points. Number 12, cry like a bitch, minus 5 points. Number 13, stick your opponent's head in the cotton candy machine for 1 full rotation, 10 points. Number 14, use a weapon from a fan on your opponent, 1 point. 14 rules there, each one good for the destruction of at least several hundred brain cells just by reading them. The DUP Cup only lasted a couple of shows when, thank God, Stand Up, later to be known as Trevor Murdoch, got booked on a tour of Japan. Number 5, the Hangman's Horror Match. Raven sure was on one in early day TNA, wasn't he? Another one of his signature match types was the Hangman's Horror, first known as the Blood Gallows of Retribution. No, not those ones. Like your secretly colonialist uncle, TNA decided they wanted to bring back hanging, with a match where the objective was to put a dog collar on them, which was attached to a chain that was attached to the ropes. Then you would have to hang them over the ropes and choke them out until they died, or until they could no longer answer the referee because they were choking to death. I forget which, but the point is that it was brutal and dangerous, and it wasn't even a one-off, as Raven had this type of match with Vampiro, Sonjay Dutt, and Abyss before the stip was retired before someone, choked to death. Number 4, Silent Night, Bloody Night. Okay, so now we're just flat out stealing match titles from bad movies, are we? And what a shocking Christmas cluster bastard this mess was. It won't surprise you to find out that Black Rain, Relic, that's full-blooded Italian spelled backwards, and Abyss are all involved. But you should also know that Shark Boy's there too. I'm sure there's a reason for that, but I have to confess I don't care enough to find out what that reason is. Anyway, Silent Night, Bloody Night is another trashy, plunder-filled brawl, but with a Yuletide theme. Instead of traditional weapons, there was a barbed wire Christmas tree, but with evil presents underneath it. Oh, but the tree didn't stay standing on the canvas. That would be too boring. This tree swung from a rope. Speaking of swinging from a rope, remember Hangman's Horror from a minute ago? Feels like a palate cleanser after watching this rubbish. Number 3, Cuffed in the Cage. This is the last cage match, I swear down. Not just the last cage match on this countdown, but the last cage match I will ever watch. Well done, TNA, you beat me. The kinkily named Cuffed in the Cage was a 6-team affair at Lockdown 2008. The objective was to handcuff all the other members of the various teams to the cage. Whichever person or full team manages to not get cuffed to the cage wins. It's just dumb, isn't it? Like, you already have 12 guys at a small space, and now you're gonna make sure that they're tethered right next to where the ropes are. The stipulation basically grounded all of the participants and meant that they mainly shuffled about and hugged each other in the corners in lieu of proper action, until Super Eric made his debut and injected some excitement with a big dive off the top. Good lad. Number 2, the Dixieland match. It's named after derisive former TNA president Dixie Carter, so how much of a success do you think this'll be? The Dixieland match was a hybrid ladder and cage. Oh, for fuck's sake! I thought we'd had our last cage match already. Why are you doing this to me? What did I do to you, TNA? Leave me alone! So, as I was saying, it's a hybrid ladder and cage match. Not something cool like a ladder inside a cage or anything like that, but a match that you basically have to win twice by first escaping the cage and then going to the entrance stage where you have to climb a ladder to retrieve the title. Jeff Hardy and Magnus were the ones vying for the vacant TNA heavyweight title, and they tried, bless them, but the match didn't quite work and the ladder portion only lasted about a minute. Jeff, naturally, took a big bump onto his head for the finish. Number 1, the Reverse Battle Royal. So, we've mentioned a bunch now how TNA will take a standard time-proven stipulation match and fanny about with it just to try and be different. Sometimes it works, most of the time it doesn't. Other times it's the Reverse Battle Royal, a match so stupid and needlessly complicated that I don't quite know where to begin. Another genius Vince Russo invention, the Reverse Battle Royal saw 16 wrestlers start outside of the ring. The objective was then to fight your way into the ring by climbing over the ropes, with the first 8 progressing to a regular over-the-top rope battle royal. Then the final 2 people in that match would meet in a regular one-on-one match. This was all part of the Fight for the Right tournament, so the winner of the Reverse Battle Royal mess would then meet the winner of a 6-man tournament in a final with a future title shot on the line. And that was just the first time they did it. Yes, they did it more than once. The second time, they used the Reversed Battle Royal elimination order to determine the tournament seeding. Tell you what, I'd like to book Vince Russo in a reverse pole match. What's a reverse pole match, you ask? Well, the objective is to get a pole and shove it right up Vince Russo's ass.